Welcome to the channel. Today we will discuss the story of the rise of Islam in Taiwan is often overshadowed by the broader historical narratives of Buddhism, Taoism, and Christianity, but the truth is that Islam, while a minority faith on the island, has left an undeniable and meaningful imprint on its society, culture, and international relations. To understand the trajectory of Islam in Taiwan, it is necessary to explore both the historical circumstances that brought Muslims to this island and the socio-political dynamics that shaped their presence over centuries. Taiwan, lying at a strategic position in East Asia, became a meeting point of various civilizations, and although Islam never grew into a majority faith, its presence represents an important chapter in Taiwan's multicultural development. The rise of Islam in Taiwan cannot be separated from the broader currents of Chinese history, maritime trade, colonial experiences, and post-war migrations, all of which played crucial roles in forming the unique identity of Muslims in Taiwan today. Islam first reached East Asia through the maritime Silk Road and the flourishing trade connections that connected the Middle East with China. During the Tang dynasty, Arab and Persian traders sailed to Canton, Quanzhou, and other port cities, where they built mosques and established merchant communities. Although Taiwan was not a central hub during the Tang period, its proximity to Fujian, a province with one of the oldest Muslim communities in China, meant that Islamic influence was never entirely absent from the island's history. Archaeological evidence and local oral traditions suggest that Muslim sailors and traders might have landed in Taiwan as early as the Song dynasty, though such visits were sporadic and did not result in permanent settlements. Nonetheless, this laid the earliest foundations for the idea of Islam's reach to the island, even if only indirectly. A more permanent Muslim presence in Taiwan became possible after the Ming dynasty expanded maritime activity and after Chinese settlers from Fujian and Guangdong migrated to Taiwan. Some of these settlers were descendants of Hui Muslims, who, through intermarriage and centuries of cultural assimilation, had blended into Chinese society. When Zheng Chunggong, also known as Koxinger, expelled the Dutch from Taiwan in the 17th century, he brought with him thousands of soldiers and settlers from the mainland. Historical records suggest that among his forces were Hui Muslims from Fujian. While few traces of their religious practice survived in later generations, these early Muslim arrivals represent the first wave of Islamic presence in Taiwan that was linked to settlement rather than trade. However, because of assimilation policies, intermarriage, and the dominance of Chinese folk religion, most of these early Muslims lost their religious identity within a few generations, leaving only faint traces in surnames, genealogies, and local legends. The Qing dynasty's incorporation of Taiwan in the late 17th century did little to strengthen Islamic practice on the island. The Qing administration was more concerned with securing borders, integrating indigenous groups, and encouraging Han migration than supporting minority religious communities. Muslim settlers from Fujian and Guangdong who came during the Qing period often blended into the broader Han population. The absence of mosques, religious teachers, and organized institutions meant that Islam during this time was a silent presence, remembered in family stories but rarely practiced openly. Yet, this disappearance of Islamic practice in early Taiwan is itself significant because it illustrates the resilience of cultural memory. Despite assimilation, the idea that Muslims had once been part of Taiwan's settlement remained, even if their religious identity had been muted. It was during the Japanese colonial era, from 1895 to 1945, that Taiwan first experienced a different type of interaction with Islam. The Japanese Empire had its own encounters with Muslim populations in its colonies, particularly in northeast China, Korea, and Southeast Asia. The Japanese authorities were interested in the role Islam could play in the geopolitical strategies, especially in dealing with Southeast Asian Muslims under European colonial rule. Although the number of Muslims in Taiwan during the Japanese period was extremely small, the Japanese administration did conduct some research and surveillance of Muslim communities as part of its broader imperial policies. A few Muslim soldiers and workers from other parts of the empire passed through Taiwan, leaving behind limited but noteworthy records. These experiences, though minor, prepared Taiwan for the next, much larger wave of Muslim arrivals that would permanently shape its Islamic community. The most decisive moment in the rise of Islam in Taiwan came in the mid-20th century, following the Chinese Civil War. When the Kuomintang government retreated to Taiwan in 1949 after its defeat by the Chinese Communist Party, it brought with it around 2 million people from mainland China. Among these refugees were approximately 20,000 Muslims, mainly Hui from northern and western provinces such as Ningxia, Gansu, and Xinjiang. Unlike earlier Muslim arrivals who had gradually assimilated, these new migrants maintained a strong religious identity, supported by religious leaders, institutions, and a collective determination to preserve their faith. They formed the core of Taiwan's modern Muslim community. The government of the Republic of China recognized the unique needs, and with assistance from both local authorities and international Muslim organizations, the first modern mosques in Taiwan were constructed during the 1950s. Taipei Grand Mosque, completed in 1960, became the center of Islamic life in Taiwan, symbolizing the revival of Islam on the island. These mid-20th century Muslims were not merely refugees. They were professionals, soldiers, intellectuals, and traders who contributed to Taiwan's development. Their presence also gave Taiwan a new channel for diplomatic outreach. During the Cold War, when Taiwan sought allies among Muslim-majority countries, the existence of an active Muslim community on the island provided cultural legitimacy. Delegations from the Middle East and Southeast Asia often visited the Taipei Grand Mosque, and Taiwan's Muslim leaders traveled abroad to build connections. This exchange helped Taiwan secure recognition and partnerships from Muslim-majority nations at a time when it was struggling with diplomatic isolation due to the rise of the People's Republic of China. As Taiwan industrialized and modernized, its Muslim population remained small, never exceeding a fraction of a percent of the total population. However, its influence was magnified through symbolic and cultural roles. The Taipei Grand Mosque, Kaohsiung Mosque, Taichung Mosque, and other centers became not just places of worship but also cultural landmarks. Muslim organizations established schools, cultural associations, and halal certification bodies that introduced Taiwanese society to the dietary, educational, and ethical aspects of Islam. Taiwan's government, in its pursuit of multicultural policies, began to recognize the Muslim community as part of the island's diverse heritage. From the late 20th century onwards, a new wave of Muslims began arriving in Taiwan, not as refugees but as workers and students. Taiwan's economic boom attracted migrant workers from Indonesia, Malaysia, and other Southeast Asian nations, many of whom were Muslim. These workers introduced new cultural practices, languages, and traditions to Taiwan's Muslim community, which had until then been dominated by Hui Chinese. Indonesian domestic workers, in particular, became a significant part of Taiwan's Islamic presence, filling mosques on weekends and establishing their own prayer spaces in factories and dormitories. Universities also began hosting Muslim students from Malaysia, Pakistan, and the Middle East, who added to the diversity of Taiwan's Muslim population. This transformed Islam in Taiwan from a primarily Chinese-centered faith into a multicultural and transnational community. The integration of Islam into Taiwanese society has not always been without challenges. As a minority religion, Muslims have faced difficulties in securing prayer spaces, maintaining halal standards, and educating the younger generation in their faith. Yet Taiwan's democratic framework has given them opportunities for advocacy and growth. Halal certification has become particularly important, both for domestic Muslim consumers and for Taiwan's international tourism industry. In recent years, Taiwan has actively promoted itself as a Muslim-friendly destination, establishing halal restaurants, prayer rooms in airports and public spaces, and government partnerships with Muslim-majority countries. This represents a remarkable shift from Islam being a nearly invisible minority faith to being a part of Taiwan's global cultural outreach. The rise of Islam in Taiwan is also deeply connected to questions of identity and belonging. For the Hui Muslims who arrived in the 1940s, preserving their faith was a way of holding on to cultural roots while adapting to a new homeland. For the Southeast Asian migrants, Islam became both a source of comfort and a bridge of connection with the Taiwanese society that hosted them. For Taiwanese converts to Islam, Though small in number, embracing the faith has been a personal journey of spiritual exploration in a society traditionally shaped by Buddhism, Taoism, and Christianity. Together, these groups illustrate that Islam in Taiwan is not a monolithic presence but a mosaic of experiences shaped by history, migration, and adaptation. One cannot ignore the role of Taiwan's Muslims in diplomacy. While Taiwan has limited formal recognition in the Muslim world due to pressures from Beijing, cultural and religious ties have helped maintain unofficial relations. Muslim delegations frequently visit Taiwan, and Taiwan participates in interfaith dialogues that include Islamic voices. These interactions are not only symbolic but also strategic, as they allow Taiwan to assert its multicultural identity in international forums. Islam, in this way, becomes both a domestic religion and a diplomatic tool. The influence of Islam in Taiwan extends beyond religious practice into food, culture, and intellectual life. Halal Taiwanese dishes have emerged, blending local flavors with Islamic dietary requirements. Mosques host lectures and cultural festivals that attract non-Muslim visitors, fostering interfaith understanding. Islamic art, calligraphy, and architecture have added new dimensions to Taiwan's cultural landscape. The presence of Muslims has also challenged stereotypes and encouraged Taiwanese society to think more globally about issues of diversity and inclusion. Looking forward, the future of Islam in Taiwan depends on how the community navigates generational change and social integration. The descendants of Hui Muslims face questions about identity, as many grow up speaking Mandarin or Taiwanese rather than their ancestral dialects, and sometimes struggle to balance modern life with traditional faiths. Migrant workers face challenges of labor rights and social acceptance, but their presence continues to enrich Taiwan's cultural fabric. Converts to Islam represent a growing but quiet voice that shows the appeal of the religion even in non-traditional contexts. Together, these groups form the tapestry of Islam in Taiwan, each contributing to the rise and resilience of the faith on the island. Thus, the rise of Islam in Taiwan is not a story of conquest or mass conversion but rather one of resilience, adaptation, and quiet influence. From early traders and soldiers to 20th century refugees and modern migrant workers, Muslims in Taiwan have shaped and reshaped their identity in response to changing political and social realities. Their small numbers belie their significant impact, both in Taiwan's domestic multiculturalism and in its international relations. Islam in Taiwan is a story of continuity and renewal, of how a global faith found a home on a small island and how that island, in turn, found new ways to engage with the wider Muslim world. It is a story that continues to evolve, reflecting the broader themes of Taiwan's history, migration, adaptation, and the coexistence of diverse traditions. Thanks for watching the video.